The lights inside the theater were already blinding, but the silence was louder than anything Rio Cruz had ever known. In that moment, standing alone at the center of the America's Got Talent stage, he felt the same nervous tightness he used to feel as a boy in Cebu whenever the electricity went out and the whole neighborhood fell quiet. Except the silence wasn't caused by darkness. It was caused by millions of eyes waiting for him to fail. Before this story truly begins, let me ask you something. Have you ever had one moment in life where everything you loved, everything you feared, and everything you dreamed came down to a single breath? If stories of courage, music, and impossible dreams move your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is not just a performance, it's a life rewritten by one song. Rio grew up in a small Filipino household where the walls were thin and the dreams were even thinner. His father worked long hours repairing fishing boats, his hands always smelling of salt and oil, while his mother sold food at a roadside stall. Money was scarce, but music was everywhere. On Sunday mornings, an old radio would crackle to life, and somehow, through all the static, Elvis Presley's voice would float into their home. Rio didn't understand the English lyrics at first, but he understood the feeling. The power. The confidence. The freedom. While other kids played outside, Rio stood in front of a cracked mirror, holding a broom like a microphone, copying Elvis's stance, his movements, his voice. The neighbors laughed, teachers told him to focus on real studies, and even relatives warned him that singing would never put food on the table. As the years passed, reality hit hard. Rio dropped out of college to help his family, working night shifts as a hotel cleaner. Every night, after scrubbing floors and emptying trash, he would sneak into the empty ballroom, stand on the stage, and sing softly so no one could hear. That ballroom became his sanctuary. But life has a way of testing dreams. One night, a hotel manager caught him singing and mocked him in front of co-workers, telling him he sounded like a cheap Elvis copy. That laughter stayed with Rio for years. He almost quit singing that night. Almost. Then came the audition announcement. America's Got Talent. Rio laughed at the idea at first. He didn't have money. He didn't have connections. He barely had confidence. But his mother looked at him and said something that changed everything: if you never try, you already failed. Those words pushed him onto a plane he never thought he'd board, into a country he'd only seen on television, and onto a stage that had broken stronger people before him. The day of the audition, something unexpected happened. Producers told him the rules were strict: one song, limited time, no gimmicks. But Rio had prepared something different. He wanted to start with Elvis, but end with a Filipino classic blended into it, honoring his roots. The producers hesitated. It wasn't standard. It bent the rules. But something about his quiet confidence made them allow it, barely. When Rio walked onto the stage, the judges smiled politely. Simon Cowell leaned back, arms crossed, already expecting disappointment. The audience whispered, "A Filipino Elvis?" It sounded like a joke. Rio introduced himself in a soft voice, his accent clear, his nerves visible. And then the music started. The first note stunned the room. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't flashy. But it was real. His voice carried the pain of years of doubt and the warmth of a boy who once sang into a broken mirror. When he transitioned from Elvis into the Filipino song, the rules were technically broken, but something magical happened. The audience stopped caring about rules. Some people stood up without realizing it. A judge's smile faded into shock. Simon leaned forward. By the final note, there were tears. Real tears. The kind that come from recognition, not pity. Rio stood frozen, unsure if he had gone too far. For a few seconds, no one clapped. And then the entire theater exploded. Applause. Cheers. A standing ovation that felt like an earthquake. Simon spoke last. He admitted he hated rule breakers, but then said something Rio would remember forever: sometimes, breaking the rules is exactly what music is supposed to do. That performance changed everything. Rio didn't just advance in the competition, he advanced in life. Back home in the Philippines, families gathered around televisions, children pointed at the screen, and parents whispered, "That could be you." Rio became more than a singer. He became proof. But success didn't erase struggle. Online critics called him a copycat. Others said his story was staged. The pressure nearly crushed him. Yet every time doubt returned, Rio remembered the hotel ballroom, the broom microphone, the laughter that once tried to silence him. By the time his AGT journey ended, whether he won or not no longer mattered. He had already won something greater: his voice, his identity, and his courage. One song. One voice. One Filipino Elvis who didn't just break the rules, but broke the limits placed on him by fear. And if you're watching this right now, wondering if your dream is too small, too strange, or too late, remember Rio. Remember that sometimes all it takes is one moment of bravery to change everything. If this story inspired you even a little, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Because your song might be next. The moment the camera lights flared on and the crowd hushed into a strange, heavy silence, something invisible shifted in the air. This was not just another audition. This was the kind of moment where destiny leans forward to listen. Before this story pulls you in completely, take 1 second. If you believe in underdogs, in music that heals, and in dreams that refuse to die, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us why hope still matters. Now listen closely, because this is the story of one song, one voice, and one Filipino Elvis who did what no one thought was allowed. His name was Mateo Reyes, but back home in a small coastal town in the Philippines, everyone simply called him Tay. He was born into a life that taught him responsibility before it taught him dreams. His father left early each morning to work construction under the burning sun, and his mother washed clothes for neighbors just to keep rice on the table. Their house was small, patched with rusted tin and wood, but inside it lived something powerful: music. An old radio sat near the window, its sound fuzzy, its antenna bent. Late at night, when the world slowed down, that radio carried voices from far away. One voice, deep and emotional, wrapped itself around young Mateo's heart. Elvis Presley. Mateo didn't understand the words, but he felt them. The longing. The fire. The freedom. When Elvis sang, Mateo felt less trapped. As a child, Mateo sang everywhere, while sweeping floors, while fetching water, while walking barefoot to school. Other kids laughed at his accent when he tried to copy Elvis. Teachers told him to stop daydreaming. Singing won't save you, they said. But Mateo kept singing anyway. Music became his escape from hunger, from fear, from the quiet shame of being poor. When his father fell sick, Mateo quit school to work. He cleaned buses, carried boxes, and later found a job as a hotel janitor. His hands grew rough, his shoulders tired, but his voice stayed alive. At night, when the hotel halls were empty, Mateo would hum softly while mopping floors, imagining an audience he couldn't see. One night changed everything. A guest overheard him singing and complained. The manager dragged Mateo out into the lobby and mocked him in front of everyone. "You think you're Elvis?" he laughed. "Stick to cleaning." The laughter cut deeper than hunger ever had. Mateo went home that night and didn't sing for weeks. His dream felt childish, embarrassing, impossible. But his mother noticed the silence. She placed her hand on his chest and said, "If you bury your voice, you bury your soul." That was the night Mateo decided fear would no longer decide his life. Months later, he saw a clip online: America's Got Talent auditions. Bright lights. Big dreams. Big risks. He almost scrolled past it. Who was he to dream that big? But something inside him whispered, one chance is enough. Mateo saved every spare coin, borrowed money, and filled out the application with shaking hands. When he was accepted, he cried, not because he was confident, but because he was terrified. On audition day, the rules were clear. One song. No medleys. No changes. Mateo nodded, but his heart was divided. He wanted to sing Elvis, yes, but he also wanted the world to hear where he came from. He planned something risky, blending Elvis with a Filipino classic his mother used to sing. The producers warned him. If you break the rules, you could be cut. Mateo smiled softly. Then let my cut be honest. When he walked onto the AGT stage, the judges looked curious but distant. Simon Cowell leaned back, arms crossed. The audience whispered. A Filipino Elvis? It sounded like a novelty act. Mateo introduced himself in a humble voice, mentioning his parents, his job, his country. Then the music started. The first note was smooth but emotional, trembling slightly with nerves. His Elvis impression was respectful, not exaggerated. But then, halfway through, he did it. He shifted melodies. The Filipino song flowed in, raw and heartfelt, sung in his native language. Something remarkable happened. The room changed. People stopped judging and started feeling. A woman in the audience wiped her tears. One judge sat up straight. Simon's expression softened. Mateo's voice cracked, not from weakness, but from truth. By the final note, he wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. He was. The moment the spotlight snapped on, the entire theater seemed to stop breathing. Thousands of people sat frozen, millions more watched from behind screens, and one man stood alone at the center of it all, holding a microphone that felt heavier than his entire past. Before this story fully unfolds, let me say this: if you believe that dreams can rise from the most unexpected places, if stories of courage and music touch your heart, then like this video and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to hear is not just entertainment. It's a reminder that one voice can change everything. His name is Mateo Reyes. He didn't grow up surrounded by applause or luxury. He grew up in a small coastal town in the Philippines where mornings began with the sound of waves and worries. His house was made of wood and tin, and when it rained, water slipped through the roof like unwanted memories. Mateo's father worked long hours doing physical labor, coming home exhausted, his hands rough and cracked. His mother did everything she could, washing clothes, cooking for neighbors, stretching every peso to make sure her children ate. Life taught Mateo responsibility early, but it also gave him something priceless: music. There was an old radio in their home, scratched and fading, but it worked. Late at night, when the air cooled and the world felt quieter, Mateo would turn the dial slowly, listening to voices from far away. One night, a voice stopped him. Deep. Emotional. Powerful. Elvis Presley. Mateo didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. The confidence in the voice, the emotion behind every note, it felt like freedom. From that night on, Mateo sang everywhere. He sang while sweeping floors, while walking to school, while staring at his reflection in a cracked mirror, holding a broom like a microphone. But dreams don't always receive applause. Kids at school laughed at him. Teachers told him to focus on real goals. Even relatives said singing was a waste of time. When money became tighter, Mateo dropped out of school to work. Dreams were pushed to the background as survival took center stage. He cleaned buses, carried boxes, and eventually found work as a hotel janitor. The uniform was plain, the hours long, and the work invisible. Most people passed by without ever noticing him. But music never left him. At night, after the guests were gone, Mateo would sing softly while mopping floors. Sometimes he stood in the empty ballroom, imagining a crowd that didn't exist. That room became his stage. His escape. Until one night, everything shattered. A guest heard him singing and complained. The manager dragged Mateo out and mocked him in front of others. "You think you're Elvis?" he laughed. "You're just a cleaner." The words cut deep. That night, Mateo went home and stayed silent. For the first time, he questioned his dream. Days passed without music. The house felt emptier. His mother noticed. One evening, she placed her hand on his chest and said, "If you stop singing, you stop living." Those words reignited something inside him. Mateo realized something important: his voice wasn't just a hobby. It was who he was. From that moment, he promised himself he would never let fear decide his future again. Months later, while scrolling on his phone, he saw it: America's Got Talent auditions. Bright lights. Big stages. Big risks. He laughed at first. Who was he to dream that big? But a voice inside whispered, try. Mateo saved every spare coin, borrowed money, filled out the application with shaking hands, and waited. When he got the email saying he was selected to audition, he cried, not from confidence, but from fear mixed with hope. Flying to America felt unreal. Everything was bigger. Louder. Faster. On audition day, the producers explained the rules clearly: one song, limited time, no changes. Mateo nodded, but his heart was conflicted. He wanted to sing Elvis, yes, but he also wanted to honor where he came from. He planned something risky, blending Elvis with a Filipino song his mother used to sing. The producers warned him. This could disqualify you. Mateo took a breath. Then let me be honest, he said. When Mateo walked onto the stage, the judges watched with polite curiosity. Simon Cowell leaned back, arms crossed. The audience whispered. A Filipino Elvis? Expectations were low. Mateo introduced himself humbly, his accent clear, his nerves visible. And then the music started. The first note changed everything. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. His voice carried years of struggle, doubt, and quiet hope. When he shifted into the Filipino song, the rules were broken, but something stronger took over. The audience stopped thinking. They started feeling. Faces changed. A judge leaned forward. Someone in the crowd wiped away tears. Mateo's voice trembled, not from fear, but from truth. When the final note faded, silence filled the room. Mateo thought he had failed. Then the applause exploded. A standing ovation. Cheers louder than anything he had ever heard. The judges praised not just his voice, but his courage. Simon spoke last. He admitted he disliked rule breakers, but sometimes, he said, breaking the rules is what creates magic. Mateo advanced, but something bigger had already happened. He was seen. Back home, families gathered around televisions. Children pointed at the screen. Parents whispered, that could be you. Mateo became more than a singer, he became proof. Success, however, wasn't easy. Online criticism followed. Some called him a copy. Others said his story was exaggerated. The pressure returned, heavier than before. But every night, Mateo remembered the empty ballroom, the mop in his hands, the laughter that once tried to silence him. He kept singing, not to prove others wrong, but to stay true to himself. Whether he won the competition or not no longer mattered. His journey had already changed lives, including his own. He returned home and opened a small music space for kids who couldn't afford lessons. He taught them that dreams don't need permission. That rules can guide, but courage transforms. One song changed his life. One voice crossed oceans. One Filipino Elvis reminded the world that talent has no borders. And if you're listening to this right now, this story is for you. If you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or afraid to try, remember Mateo. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and never forget, sometimes all it takes is one brave moment to rewrite your entire life. The moment the microphone touched his lips, time seemed to slow down. The crowd leaned in, the judges fixed their eyes on him, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet prayer escaped his heart. Before we go any further, let me ask you something: do you believe one moment can change an entire life? If stories of struggle, music, and hope inspire you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because this story is not just about a singer. It's about believing when no one else does. Mateo Reyes grew up in a small Filipino town where dreams were often postponed in favor of survival. His mornings began with chores and responsibilities, not fantasies of fame. His parents worked tirelessly just to keep the family afloat, and Mateo learned early that nothing in life comes easy. But in that modest home lived a treasure: music. An old radio sat near the window, and at night, it brought voices from another world. One voice stood out, strong and emotional. Elvis Presley. Mateo didn't know the words, but he felt the power. He felt seen. He started singing everywhere. On the way to school. While washing dishes. In front of a cracked mirror, pretending it was a cheering crowd. People laughed. Friends teased him. Teachers told him to focus on something practical. Still, he sang. Music became his safe place, the only space where fear couldn't reach him. Life, however, demanded sacrifice. When money ran out, Mateo left school to work. He became invisible to the world, a janitor cleaning floors that no one noticed. But even there, music followed him. Late at night, in empty halls, he sang softly, letting his voice echo off cold walls. Until one night, when someone heard him, and not in the way he hoped. His manager mocked him, laughed at his dream, and reminded him of his place. That night, Mateo almost gave up. But his mother didn't let him. She reminded him that his voice was a gift, not a mistake. That encouragement lit a fire inside him. Months later, he saw the opportunity, America's Got Talent. It felt impossible. Too big. Too far. But he applied anyway, carrying nothing but hope. On the AGT stage,